that note, I think I'm going to kick us off, get us going here. So welcome, folks. As Megan mentioned, this is the first webinar in the healthcare series, and today's webinar is Making the Case for Energy Efficiency in Healthcare. My name is Alex Thrower. I'm a senior analyst working in energy efficiency, and super excited to welcome you on behalf of Save On Energy today. Myself and Megan are from the Save On Energy team, and then we're also joined by some hosts, Ed and Stephen, who will introduce themselves shortly. And then we have some exciting panel guests for you in Dr. Lem and Dr. Orling, who will also be introducing themselves as we get down the road here. So firstly, I'd like to share with everyone a little bit of news for those who haven't heard about it before, but the Save On Energy team has put together the Energy Manager's Playbook. And it's a fantastic podcast where you can hear resources about what recommendations are out there about kind of things that are happening in our industry, case studies about examples of the way people are actioning energy efficiency, or even some success stories that you might relate to yourself. So I encourage everyone to give that a listen. And with that in note, I'm going to pass it off to Ed and Stephen to introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Alex, and hello, everyone. Glad to be here and glad you're here. My name is Ed Rubenstein. I'm an energy professional, currently in a bit of a career transition, but I've spent over 20 years working in sustainability and energy management in healthcare, and I really can't resist a good healthcare sustainability or energy conversation. So excited to talk. This is going to be a great panel, slightly different angle, but really excited to be talking about this and learning from this as well and seeing where this goes. Stephen.
Great, thank you, Ed. Yeah, I've been an energy guy for 45 years. That's all I've done for virtually all of my career. Worked in a number of different organizations and types of organizations, from industrial, commercial, residential, and utilities. So all things energy. I think I met Ed probably about 20 years ago now, right? Doing some workshops with the Ontario Hospital Association. But one of the questions we're going to talk about today kind of relates to something I said to Ed early on. You know, as an energy person, as a technical person, I didn't really feel what I was doing was that important within healthcare when there are many, many other important things going on in a healthcare facility. Ed's shown me why that's not true and why what I do is important to healthcare. But we're also going to learn that perspective from our guest today. So I welcome this opportunity to participate, maybe prompt the discussion around making the case for efficiency within healthcare.
Wonderful. Thank you to you both. With this in mind, I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping. As of right now, a lot of people are participating with their mics off and their cameras off, and that's great for kind of making sure there's clarity and so that we can hear each other nice and clearly. But I really encourage you to either put your hand up or be active in the chat and kind of join us in today's discussion. That's really our hope. We have a whole team of us here, and whether you're joining in the chat or you'd like to say something out loud, we really welcome that perspective, and we really want today to be an interactive experience. So we hope you walk away today with the ability to describe the unique energy profile of healthcare facilities, recognize some of the key drivers for energy management within the healthcare sector, describe the intersectionality between energy management, healthcare, and public health, and establish the value of energy efficiency, as we mentioned, and also on a little bit of tidbit of exploring some tools and standards that might be out there for your next step exploring resources kind of along your journey. So feel free to kind of participate in the chat, be interactive, raise your hand, and we welcome any questions, comments. And if we can't answer them today, we have all the resources to hopefully connect you with someone or answer them down the road. So please be interactive, and we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the unique energy profile in healthcare facilities, be they large or small. I think most people here either are working in healthcare or have worked with healthcare, and you know that it is an energy intense sector. It's a 24/7 operations. There's lots of equipment, lots of specific heating and cooling needs, ventilation, humidity. And you can see it is a significant contributor to overall greenhouse gas emissions, which are obviously very closely related to energy use. So it's about 5% of overall Canadian emissions come from healthcare. So what we're going to go through is talk about this. This obviously opens up some unique challenges to energy management in healthcare, but also in my experience, some unique opportunities as well. So looking forward to talking about this a little bit more over the next little while. If I could get the next slide, please. So a little bit more detail, some of you who dialed in earlier, we were speaking with Dr. Orling and how there's a new hospital being built because the existing hospital is at its run its course at its end of life. So not unusual, just because healthcare, the way it's been delivered, the way it's been grown, a lot of the infrastructure is aging and complex, old, and in a nod to Guillermo del Toro, Frankenstein, these buildings may have been built 30, 40, 50. I've even seen buildings that are 80 years old, and the use has changed over those years. There's lots of renovations. And because of that, because of changing buildings and things like that, there's this mythical beast known as the as-built, which don't really exist. So sometimes even the men and women who operate the buildings from a facility standpoint, even though they do fantastic jobs, they're not really sure how the systems are set up because they're poorly documented. What they do have a good sense on is how they're operated. And in my experience, that's equally as important because there are, usually in older, more complex buildings, there's some shortfalls in terms of how the systems are built. But again, the men and women operating them are brilliant, and they have a way of operating the buildings which are maybe not immediately apparent to those coming from the outside trying to work on energy efficiency and things like that. Similarly, renovation challenges. I work in energy and healthcare for over 20 years. We did lots of great things, but you're always competing against other things happening in the hospital. The prime business in a hospital is patient care, research, maybe teaching and things like that. So that budget is always going to be constrained. We need to build the infrastructure that the clinicians need to deliver healthcare, but we're always competing with other things needed for healthcare. So in terms of operations, in terms of energy efficiency, maybe we can't always do, or we weren't always able to do what we wanted to do. And having said that, standards change. I've been fortunate over the years. I've been a part of a number of CSA standards, Canadian Standards Association for healthcare. As we learn more about infection control, safety, and things like that, the standards change. So the ventilation requirements, the lighting requirements, the electrical requirements, etc., often have changed. And anytime you go in to do a renovation, sometimes you're stuck with a space that maybe it's grandfathered, maybe you need to upgrade it as well. And it's a bit of a technical challenge. How do you get these new systems and these new standards into old buildings where you maybe have space constraints, etc.? So high plug loads, I mean, this is something, sorry, if you could go just back one slide, just to touch on this for a second, Alex. So the high plug loads, I mean, healthcare, like anything else, is changing. There's a lot more IT being involved. Artificial intelligence is everywhere these days, but also more equipment, MRIs, CT scans, and things like that. MRIs are not just more MRIs, and it's well documented, some of the pinch points in healthcare in Canada and in Ontario, but also stronger MRIs. As we learn more, as we're able to advance patient care, the equipment that we need to do that is changing, and very often that equipment is bringing increased load requirements for hospitals.
Actually, Ed, I want to just comment something there.
Of course.
The plug loads beyond, say, diagnostic equipment. There are many other plug loads, smaller loads, and it's through people and how the people operate those things. A lot of that's going to be managed, because we can't, as energy management practitioners, we can't change those things, but we could influence the way they are being operated. And it comes back to, like you said, the people that operate the facility know that facility so well. So we have to recognize the human aspect of this thing as well.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And I think that's something that hopefully becomes apparent throughout the session today, that when we're talking about energy management, even though we will talk about equipment and widgets and HVAC systems, probably more in the second and third sessions, the key element for energy, either using it or managing it, is going to be people. So that's amazing. Thank you, Stephen. Next slide, please. Multiple microenvironments. So kind of spoke about how, requirements have changed, but it's not unusual if you go in, for example, into a hospital, to an inpatient area where you may have a clean room, you may have, for pharmaceutical compounding, you may have a positive pressure isolation room, a negative pressure isolation room, you may have the need for, some flash sterilization and things like that. So you can almost think about every unit within a healthcare facility as its own business with its own energy needs. It's amazing. You could be on one floor, look at a unit, go down a floor, look at a unit. On the surface, it looks exactly the same, but the energy needs are completely different. Throw in stuff like dialysis, labs, sterilization, and you could see, especially if you layer on top of that the so-called Frankensteining and development over the years, how complex the energy landscape can be in the healthcare facility. And that is, again, that is a challenge, but in my experience has also opened up some unique opportunities on how we can optimize energy use within a hospital. Hospitals 24/7, and you know what? As I like to say, it's sometimes in a hospital the energy needs are life and death. It's part of it. One thing I have to say, having worked in healthcare for a long time, is that it really grounds you as to what's an emergency. So there's things working in the background where there's urgent, and we all have emergencies in our day-to-day jobs. Sometimes in a hospital you have really real emergencies. So it's not just do we need energy. No one wants to lose energy. No one wants to have an outage and things like that. But in my experience, in my opinion, it is especially critical in a healthcare setting. Um, you have 24/7, not just 24/7 operations, but 24/7 public access. They're generally open access healthcare facilities. Temperature is important everywhere, but temperature in a healthcare setting, humidity, how it relates to the transmission of disease is extremely important in a healthcare setting. And we'll talk a little bit about that throughout today, probably, right? So on top of everything else, hospitals have emergency power systems. It could be, generators, batteries. They may have backup redundancy. Add to the complexity, but you can see in the words on screen there. Also, in my experience, opens up a lot of opportunity how we can use energy within healthcare facilities. And healthcare, this is sort of, repeating what we said before, but, high filtration, lots of fresh air requirements in operating rooms and labs. It means high filtration. We may talk about some of the impacts of wildfires on healthcare and things like that. But there's a lot of air, there's a lot of water, there's a lot of garbage as well going through healthcare. So all of these things are high demand and really pushing forward, a high energy use index or high energy intensity, as I like to say, within healthcare. Next slide, please.
I think these just reiterate what you've already said here, Ed. So
Yeah.
for those later on, we'll be sending the slides. I think they're recording out, and so that would be available to folks as well. So we could
Yeah, so-
probably move on to the slide 11. There we go.
Now, tied to what was said before, I mean, energy use by end use, you could see HVAC is a huge part. I always like to say HVAC is about 50% of a hospital's energy use. And HVAC, because of the unique ventilation requirements, humidity requirements, and things like that, is especially complex in the healthcare setting. It's expensive to change. It's expensive to operate. But it is really the largest opportunity. And I can't tell you how many times, I've been involved in projects where, they're changing the use of a space. We need additional cooling. The limiting factor is the HVAC. How do we get enough cooling? How do we get the right airflows, right? And it takes some pretty creative engineering and construction to actually make that fit, which is great. Where the patient care needs are met. However, it makes the system even more complex. And, when you realize if you change, the HVAC system in one small part of your healthcare building, it impacts the overall healthcare ecosystem. So again, HVAC is a big part of it, but, the other parts, the auxiliary equipment we spoke about, lighting is extremely important in healthcare as well. So it all adds up, but there's a huge, huge opportunity when you're looking at the HVAC system in a healthcare setting.
It's interesting. This is a nice, pretty graph, and it kind of, okay, it's very simple. We can see where it's all going. But the one thing I've learned about any facility, specifically healthcare facility, is this graph for any particular building is going to be unique, right?
Yes.
Not just to the sector. And if you're approaching this for the service providers out there, you've got to look at the facility as it stands and as it operates too, because that can make a big difference. And making assumptions around sort of generalizations when you were looking for opportunities doesn't work in many facilities, certainly doesn't work in a healthcare facility.
Yeah, absolutely. Every hospital, I mean, when I was at the University Health Network, there were, I've lost track, 7 or 8 different buildings, and each of them had their own unique profile. They're all unique and beautiful in their own way. And you have to love all your children, but they all had different personalities from an energy perspective, for sure.
But sometimes those unique features or unique configurations actually offer opportunities, right?
Yes.
Because of the way you can reuse heat and that type of thing too. So by embracing that uniqueness, you may find improvements.
Next slide, please, Alex. So I mean, I talked about the complexity. This graph is showing sort of on the x-axis the energy use index, so how much energy is used by per square meter of conditioned space, and on the y-axis it has the Energy Star score. So on the x-axis we want to be as far to the left as possible, and the y-axis we want to be as high as possible. You could see that there's a wide range here. There are some, hospitals which are maybe higher on the energy use index or more energy intensity, and yet because of the type of service and the work they've done, they score really high on their Energy Star. So you could see there's a wide range of opportunities, from the most energy efficient in the top left corner there to the ones who have maybe a bit more opportunity. Now, having said that, when I was working at UHN, every hospital is unique and beautiful. Sometimes you're really limited by the building infrastructure, right? There's only so far you can go with the existing building. Benchmarking is extremely important. So public hospitals and healthcare in Ontario has been required to do energy reporting for a number of years under provincial regulation. Also, Energy Star is a great way you can actually compare your hospital to others. But this is probably the first step to see where you lie in here. But I can promise you, you could be in the top left of this graph or the bottom right of this graph, and there usually are opportunities to enhance the delivery of energy and the energy management in your facility.
I'd underscore that. We were into a facility a little while ago that was a 94 on that left-hand scale, and we still found about 11% reduction opportunity. So and the other thing I want to reinforce here is that even though traditionally benchmarking is done on energy intensity, gigajoules per square meter or kilowatt hours per square foot, the challenge is, because of the nature of the facility and all the things going on, you need a much more objective way to compare facilities. And that's where the Energy Star score is one way to do that. It takes into account other factors, the amount of diagnostic equipment, the amount of computer, IT equipment, the number of people, the number of patients, and so on. It's a better way to make those comparisons, because you could have a very good, essentially, energy intensity, but because your hospital is configured in a certain way, you may actually not be as good as you think you are. So it's always good to use an objective rating like the Energy Star score. There's other ones too, but it's certainly one that's widely available.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please, Alex.
Oh, I love Venn diagrams.
So yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
Well, I was going to say, so when we put this webinar together and this discussion together, we know that, and you'll see this in the next few minutes, you'll see that both Dr. Lem and Dr. Orling have done a lot of work within sustainability, and I think each one of them will probably say, we're not an energy efficiency expert. But what we wanted to do is to understand what the context for energy management, or what we're also maybe referring to as energy efficiency. I started off in this business, it was called energy conservation, which meant do without. Everybody ran the other way when I came near a building, right? But that's certainly not the way it is today. So we need to understand where energy management or efficiency fits within the context of sustainability overall. And maybe you and I could have a bit of discussion, but I would again welcome maybe during the introductions Dr. Orling and Dr. Lem to maybe speak to what their view on this one is too. I'd almost think we need to move this slide after their introductions anyway, but we'll get there.
Yeah, I have to agree. And the one reason, I mean, I really enjoyed working at University Health Network, and at the end of my time, they're actually quite early in my time, I really truly believe that energy management was healthcare, because it really fed into the economic sustainability of the health system, the environmental impacts, the social impacts as well, and huge social impacts of healthcare. So, and you could see that I think we chose sustainability on purpose because it's not just energy management. You'll see that the case for energy efficiency in healthcare is much broader than that, and really does touch in all of these three circles. So, and I am looking forward to hearing what Dr. Orling and Dr. Lem say, because this is part of what they do every day. So
we'll leave that one out there for you. And I guess at this point, it is my turn to take over and introduce our panelists, our guests here today. And I'm really looking forward to this. So we can go to the next slide. So we'll start with Dr. Lem. And it's really interesting, Dr. Lem, you seem very accomplished with respect to sort of the media side of it. You're a columnist. You're also an assistant professor. So there's some great accomplishments here. And I'm really looking forward to your input here today. But the one thing I'd like to ask you to do, well, I'd like to ask you to introduce yourself. I'm not going to read the rest of this. Just tell us about yourself. But specifically, what inspired you to get involved in sustainability in healthcare? What was the thing that really led to you becoming interested in that?
Thanks so much for introducing me, Stephen. Well, I would say it sounds a little hokey maybe, but what inspired me to get involved in sustainability was, to be honest, becoming a mom 11 years ago. I'd already been doing advocacy work around connecting people to nature for health, which was my original entry point into planetary health for about 5 years at that point. And to be completely honest, I was avoiding the topic of climate change because it seemed scary and intimidating. But I had time on my hands to read while I was nursing my 3-month-old for hours every day, and I decided to pick up Naomi Klein's book, This Changes Everything, which is about climate change and capitalism. And that probably changed the course of my life, was holding this little baby in my arms and learning about the world that he would live in if we didn't take effective climate action now, which motivated me to join the work of CAPE, which is the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, Canada's largest environmental NGO driven by health professionals. And I guess the rest is history. But I mentioned a bit that my first entry point was nature and health, and I would say really wanting to protect the ecosystems that sustain us also, and having a personal connection to the natural spaces that I grew up in and that I now live and work in. Within Vancouver, the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations is a big driver as well.
That's very interesting. I really like the idea that it was your child, right? That really sort of the genesis is it's spending time with that child. I once asked my father what's a good criteria for a job, and he said to me, a job where you can leave the world a better place than where you found it. And that may be really difficult, but that's definitely what's driven me. So thank you for that. It seems to resonate with me for sure. And you've got resonate in here too. Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Lang. We're going to hear from you a lot more, I'm sure, coming up. So moving on to Dr. Orling.
Yeah, thanks very much, Stephen, and welcome everybody. My journey in sustainability in healthcare, I don't need to go all the way back, but I've always loved the outdoors, and we live in a beautiful place. I have kids as well, and I'd like it to stay that way for them. I had the fortunate experience of doing some work overseas and seeing the impact of our systems internationally, and recognizing that some of the things that we do here impact other people. And I think justice is a really important issue as well for me. I've been fortunate to be involved with the provincial organization, Ontario's Anesthesiologists, who has a sustainability working group, and similarly at my hospital, trying to improve sustainability in healthcare through those organizations. And I've learned a lot through that journey, and hopefully been able to contribute some as well. But I think, as healthcare providers, we're taught to, first do no harm is sort of the translation of one of the primary tenets of what's called the Hippocratic Oath. And the impact that we have in healthcare is supposed to improve people's health. And we want people to be, healthier and live better lives. And we need to make sure that some of the actions that we're taking, the things that we're doing, aren't negatively impacting other people, both locally and internationally. And I think that's part of what drives some of what I do.
So it's that net effect that you're talking about, right? We may locally do something to help someone, but it can have a much more broad-reaching effect. And it could, we want to make sure, and as we move forward, it's a very positive thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a great perspective. Great perspective. Well, I'm gonna actually do two things here. One is I'm gonna have Alex. Can you just flip us back to slide 13, right? So because I'd like to maybe so that's first of all energy management in the context of sustainability. Where does it sit? And I'm gonna ask Ed, I'm going to ask Dr. Erling, Dr. Lang to comment on this. And then I'm going to move forward now to slide 16, please. I'm going to test your skills there, Alexander, with, there we go. What is energy management? So this is the question, and then what I'd like to do is get a discussion going amongst our three panelists here, just in general, and I can certainly, don't feel obliged to say something, I can certainly jump in as well. But what, very stiff or vague definition, one you can pull off the internet, strategy of adjusting and optimizing energy, very technical, using systems and procedures to reduce energy requirements per unit of output, whatever that might be. It could be in the industry, but in this case, the amount of energy required to obviously provide the patient healthcare that's required in your facilities while holding constant or reducing the total cost to produce the output of these systems. So it recognizes that, there's the cost aspect, there's an energy aspect, but ultimately then if we think about it from an environmental perspective and the carbon piece and sustainability, there's that aspect as well. So comments on that. I know, Dr. Erling, you'd asked for a copy of this earlier, so maybe I'm going to put you on the spot. You've at least looked at it. Do you have a thought here?
Yeah, I think, Stephen, what jumps out to me in this is the word optimizing. And I think being innovative in healthcare is something that we always want to do. Progress is continually being made, and there's better ways that we can do things. And I think that's really important. And tying back into that Venn diagram, the idea of total cost, we tend to look at things, very focused in a short-term sense in terms of finances, and looking at more things holistically is what we need to do both in healthcare and our systems in general. And looking at things with, what I think is best referred to as a triple bottom line. I like the people part of it to be, our patients and the providers as well. The planet is obviously important. I'm sure Melissa has lots to say about planetary health and prosperity. I think prosperity is a better word than profit. We have to consider finances, but we need to look at it in a way that makes our communities and ourselves and the effects we have on other people better, not just cheaper.
All right, I can relate to that one. Leave things better than when you found them, for sure. Dr. Lem.
Well, this definition sounds like a great one for learners and engineers. It almost reminds me of something Sir Isaac Newton might approve of that I would have had to memorize in high school. All kidding aside, I think one of the issues with this definition, and this mirrors what Dr. Erling says, is that it doesn't overtly take into account the broader ecosystem of energy management. Like, what are the total costs of producing energy, not just in a balance sheet sense, but also more broadly on the environment and human health. And I want to share a statistic that blew me away when I learned it from a recent Harvard study, which is that 1 in 5 deaths around the world can be linked to air pollution from the combustion of fossil fuels. 1 in 5. And you might think, okay, here in Canada, we've got cleaner energy and processes, but the number in Canada from that study was actually 1 in 7 in this country that supposedly has a really good healthcare system. So when we think about energy management and the good that we're doing for our facilities and for our healthcare systems, sustainability more broadly, when we're managing and conserving energy, I also wanted us to think about the good that we're doing for the air we breathe, particularly if our facilities or energy grids run on fossil fuels, which I know varies across Canada and between healthcare sites. And then part and parcel with that, the good that we're doing by slowing down climate change, which the World Health Organization says is the greatest threat to global health of the 21st century. And spoiler alert, I was invited to speak on behalf of CAPE in this session, and a lot of what I'm going to touch on during our dialogue today are those broader issues for energy as they pertain to human health and ecosystems, including the traditional healthcare system, but beyond it as well.
Excellent. So yeah, I think that what you both said is exactly where we wanted to start with that broader, Venn diagram, which speaks to all the other impacts and the social, the economic, and the environmental in that sense. Megan, you're kind of capturing some of the words here. I'm just going to let the other folks online know, and maybe we can go to the next slide. And hopefully, if the technology serves us well here, Alexander, we'll see. Yeah. So what Megan has attempted to do is to pull some of the ideas that have been shared here, and we'll provide these afterwards. I hope we'll give you a chance, Dr. Lem and Dr. Erling, to review what you're being quoted as here before we send them out, but we'd like to make sure that we capture some of these things more than just in the recording itself. So one thing that I mentioned or I noticed before, Dr. Lam, you talked about the impacts on the Indigenous folks, right? So did you want to add anything? Because I know that's something you'd commented on before when we shared some of these questions with you.
Yeah, this is a good question. And I think this is an emerging trend when we start thinking about energy production, expanding our energy sources in responsible ways, and climate change. So we've worked closely, Cape BC, with Indigenous leaders, primarily in the north and also in the south of the province, around essentially their opposition to expansion of pipelines and fossil fuel facilities because of how this expansion disrupts their connection with the land and their ability to practice their traditional practices and engage in traditional healing. And so I think it's really important for us to listen to the original stewards of the land and also support their ability and their right to healthy environments, which are increasingly being threatened because of climate change, but also because of industrial developments on their lands. And in fact, Blueberry River Nation in the north of BC won a lawsuit against the BC government because of the intrusion of all the industrialization on their lands and their inability to connect to it in a healthy way. So I think we're going to see that happen more and more, especially as we've heard from the federal government and provincial government, different legislation being introduced to fast track resource development. There's going to be more and more opposition from Indigenous peoples who don't want to see that and who have a right to caretaking and stewarding their lands in the way that they see fit, and they've been able to do since time immemorial.
So we'll need to incorporate these ideas. At the end of this, I'm going to ask us as a group, not just yourself in the panel, but also folks online, to maybe think about how we can redefine this definition in a way that includes all of these things, certainly the energy production side of it as well, because that's what's going to feed the requirement of a healthcare facility. All right, Ed, I'm gonna give you the anchor leg here, or the response. So
Yeah, so thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Dr. Lim, Dr. Erling. I mean, I love that perspective, and it's something that's actually driven me in my time working in energy management. So with regards to the definition, I mean, yeah, it's maybe something that Sir Isaac Newton would have written. It's a little bit bulky, I say. The way I like to approach energy management, and this is something I found useful in healthcare and beyond, is energy management. There's two sides of it. There's what's happening inside the building, and I've always looked at that at delivering the right amount of energy in the right form to the right place at the right time, right? Controlling what's on the inside. But then when you go back to that Venn diagram, it's really looking at the broader impacts, right? So the form of energy, how is that coming? Realizing, for example, with electricity, for every kilowatt hour you reduce inside a building, there's an economic benefit to the organization, but upstream as well. How's that being generated? Are you reducing, there's line losses, you're reducing, greenhouse gas emissions as well, right? And also uniquely for healthcare, there's a couple things. So, I mean, I love the stats, and one stat that's stuck with me over time is I think in the province of Ontario, roughly 40% of the provincial budget is going towards healthcare, right? So in healthcare, we're spending a lot of money. Some of that is going for energy, but it really has the opportunity to wag the dog. This is a public good, a public right, the availability of healthcare. We're spending a lot of money on it, and it can really set the paradigm as to how we think about energy in our communities, where it's coming from. I'm a big fan. I had the opportunity to work in several district energy projects, which are a fantastic way to really change not how we just think about energy in hospitals, but in the communities they serve. On top of that, one of the earlier slides, hospitals need to have redundancy, right? So that could be, multiple layers of equipment, backup generators, and things like that. We may get into this as the slides go on, but there are impacts of climate change which hugely impact human health. More extreme heat, hotter days, right? Hospitals will have the systems to provide cooling centers, for example, right? So by looking at the energy systems and making the hospitals more resilient, they're able to also make their communities resilient to offer more than just traditional healthcare to the communities they serve as well. And it really is, that sustainability piece. I did some work at looking at, energy efficiency for, again, for people that hospitals serve. And, there's a lot of evidence showing that if people are, don't live in energy efficient houses or building, there's the potential for energy poverty. A lot more of their money is going to spend on energy than food, whatever you need. Also, because of that, you may have some suboptimal housing and things like that. And we did some, heard some amazing studies, largely in other parts of the world, where they found that, inefficient housing led to, cold houses, damp houses, mold, and things like that. That's a public health, that's a healthcare impact, right? So was also a big fan of working at the hospital, sharing our knowledge and helping other industries learn from us, gain from us, realizing that in doing so, you're also helping some of the patients we serve. I mean, a great parallel is some amazing work UHN has done. I had nothing to do with it, but you may have heard of Dr. Andrew Buzari, who's led this charge to provide housing for patients as healthcare. And, not putting myself in the same level as Dr. Buzari, but I always thought as energy management as being able to provide healthcare to the patients and communities we serve.
Interesting. Well, and I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here because I'm going to go to the next slide here. I'm going to also give Megan a bit of a break here because she's running out of space there, which is good. We've got lots of discussion. But what I want to do here is now ask this question. And the reason I want to ask you to go first, Ed, is because I know, right, as an energy person, sustainability person working within the healthcare system, you've had to make the case. I mean, this webinar is about the case for energy efficiency in healthcare. So making that case, and I know there's going to be people online who are probably having to make that case, want some assistance, some guidance, some insight into how to make that case. So maybe you could start this one off, Ed, and then I'm going to ask Dr. Lem, I guess, and Dr. Orling in that order as to, what do you see as the key drivers that are part of that case for doing this? So if there was an energy practitioner, I guess one thing we could look at it, the way we could look at this, how would an energy practitioner make that case to you within the healthcare system? Ed, I'm going to start with you and then move to Dr. Lem and Dr. Orling.
Sure. Thank you, Stephen. And I think, I'm going to focus what's happening inside the building. I think Dr. Lem and Dr. Orling will do a better job of talking about the broader impacts. But first of all, there is the dollars and cents aspect of it, right? So if you're managing your energy better and you're increasing energy efficiency, you're going to be spending less on utilities, and not an insignificant amount. We saw that big range, and we look at the energy use index. And we talked about Frankenstein systems and HVAC and things like that. There are usually a huge number of opportunities. I'll call them low, no-cost opportunities where you can use energy better and also reduce the dollars and cents, right? And that is money. I like to say that I was supporting patient care. Every dollar I saved while I was at the hospital did not go back into my budget. It went for other things within the hospital, which was okay because that was the main goal of the hospital. Now, that's great. The dollars and cents only go so far, and sometimes if you're just looking at simple payback and things like that, you will run into hurdles. We always made sure that when we did projects at the hospital that it made what I like to call the environment of care, the environment in which care is provided, better. Right? So that could be dealing with some underlying heating issues, cooling issues, ventilation issues, lighting. There were many times where, had a fantastic team at the hospital. We'd develop a project, we'd have a business case, we'd be saving some dollars and some kilowatt hours and gigajoules. And we said, well, we'd always take a pause and say, well, how can we make the environment of care better? And very often, that would harm the dollars and cents business case because we're spending money. We're not just going to put in variable speed drives, but we're going to balance the entire system and add some, do some repairs that haven't been able to be done for whatever. Or lighting was a great one as well. We did lots of retrofits to LEDs and occupancy sensors and things like that. But also realizing that there are some places where there is substandard lighting, especially in a healthcare setting. Well, let's spend some more money. Let's hurt the energy business case and make the environment of care, for the patients, for the staff better. So that was a big part of it as well. And then the last part really was the resilience. Knock on wood, doesn't happen a lot, but I have heard of instances where, a hospital will lose some of its heating capability in the middle of a cold snap, or some of its cooling ability during a hot, humid time. So we always made sure that we worked in resiliency to our projects as well. We're putting in a new pump. Maybe, we'll spend some more money. We'll put in a parallel system so we can now service pumps, or we have backup and things like that. Hurt the dollars and cents, but when I had to get approval for these things, or had to make the case for it, by coming in looking at holistically, again, I'm just focusing inside the building, but focusing holistically on how we're not just saving energy, but we're also making the hospital a better place, really help to engage people, not only get their approval, but also get their support, which is important because healthcare is a complex place. How do you change a coil in the air handling unit in a hospital, an active hospital, very carefully with a lot of support from a lot of different people. So by showing how it's going to make the hospital better for what they were doing, usually got that support and helped us to advance those projects as well.
Excellent. Well, that's a good internal foundation. So let's now take a look at it from well, you can look at it from the inside or the outside, Dr. Lem and Dr. Orling. So, Dr. Lem.
Okay, well, I'm going to be a good panelist and take this opportunity to lead into the environmental responsibility and social accountability aspects in my answer, and specifically point to why it's so important for healthcare systems to wean themselves off gas, also known as natural gas or fracked methane gas, to be more specific. I think a key driver for energy management as part of healthcare system sustainability should be our awareness of the harmful effects that energy use is having on our broader health environments, especially when there are good and healthy and viable alternatives to power our healthcare system, because there are. And I want to give you some figures around gas. We know that close to 50% of energy use in Canadian hospitals comes from natural gas. And this was sort of a surprise to me when I looked it up. That's a pretty high percentage. And meanwhile, over 80% of all the gas used and extracted in Canada is generated through a process called hydraulic fracturing. So we're not just talking kind of the old way that we made natural gas or methane gas before, was sticking a pipe in the ground and gas rising to the surface. Fracking involves injecting millions of liters of fresh water underground that are filled with sand and toxic chemicals under high pressure to crack the earth open and release gas, which is also called unconventional gas from reservoirs that are deep underground. And this process of fracking has been linked to a massive host of health harms in the published research, which primarily comes from North America and also includes studies within Canada. And so some of these health impacts include childhood cancer, include asthma, heart disease, birth defects, and premature death. So when we are using this fracked methane gas to power 50% of our healthcare facilities, beyond the greenhouse gases and beyond the air pollution that we're generating, you could argue that we are contributing to local health harms in the populations that we're trying to protect. And in a severe multi-year drought situation in northern BC, where gas is fracked in my province and where Blueberry River Nation kind of launched its lawsuit around, we're permanently removing billions of liters of fresh water from the water cycle because treating the contaminated water from this process is too expensive. So they just inject it underground into these wells that can leak over time and can then contaminate water tables. So we're also impacting food security because farmers in northern BC don't have enough water from the sky or from their local water sources to grow their crops. And as mentioned before, we're also trampling on the rights of Indigenous peoples who don't want pipelines going through their territories or don't want fracking on their territories and severing their traditional connections to their land. So I think a key driver for us to conserve and manage energy, especially when it comes to fossil fuels, is what Dr. Orling said, is our vow to do no harm in the practice of our profession. But by continuing to use fracked methane gas and to build new facilities and buildings that are powered by gas, especially, like I said, when they're good, clean energy alternatives, we're partially responsible for perpetuating those local health harms. So we need to drive down that almost 50% number of facilities powered by gas in Canada if we want healthy communities across Canada.
I find that really interesting because, I mean, I've had to make the case, not just in a healthcare facility, but other facilities for electrifying the heating sources, right? So moving from natural gas as a heating source to, say, heat pump. And with the price of gas where it's at today, and the lack of other incentives against the carbon, it's very difficult to make that case financially. But I think what you're showing is that that case could be made if those externalities could be brought to play. So I'm going to be from my point of view, I'm going to be very interested to look at those numbers and be able to make those cases and connect it, because it's not simply sufficient to say you're going to get a payback, a financial payback of this, or you're going to reduce your carbon by this. It's all those other things that have really not been recognized by many of us in the energy field, right? As as the things that are really going to drive this one forward.
And just on that topic, Stephen, there are massive subsidies that governments give to the gas industry to be able to suppress the prices that much. Like they're not lower than hydro or electricity because those are market forces. It's massive subsidies that are also making that happen. So we're basically investing in poorer health in these local communities, in addition to kind of driving demand for a product that's less healthy for us to use in our facilities.
That's a powerful way to look at it. Pardon the pun.
Can I just jump in and add something, Stephen? So
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I mean, we've lost some of the financial tools against, to get us off carbon, but I'm seeing more places that are starting to put their own internal price on carbon and work that into the equation, right? And I think, healthcare in Canada, in Ontario and Canada, as a publicly funded good, if you are, a service, there's a unique opportunity for that to be part of the equation, right? So they are externalities, but because we're looking at public spending on our buildings and providing healthcare, there's an opportunity to start looking at some internal carbon pricing as a society, as Ontario, as Canada, and work that into the equation where you maybe don't have that in other jurisdictions.
I think it's a key outcome here is for healthcare organizations and their practitioners to somehow monetize, put a value on that piece, right? Which includes all of these things. I don't mean to diminish them by calling them externalities, but they need to be brought into the fold, as you said, Ed, and put a price on the carbon or the natural gas, right? And the impact that it's having. All right, Dr. Orling, you've been very patient, so I'll let you weigh in here.
Yeah, no, thanks, Stephen. No, some great thoughts there. Yeah, I would say that everyone looks up to our healthcare workers, our healthcare institutions. It's something that we really value. And I think that we have to view our healthcare institutions, or we need to view ourselves as anchor institutions that need to lead by example and need to, be models of innovation for other people to follow. If we want society to change, if we want businesses to change, then, we need our governments to change, obviously, but we need our public institutions to change as well. And we have, brilliant people working in all facets of healthcare, yourselves included, working in the backgrounds. There's a chance to innovate, to bring in low carbon, zero carbon energy sources, to do things differently and show people how it can be done. Because the contrary, as Dr. Lem's pointed out, Ed's pointed out, is that we're causing harm by using fossil gas and in some of our practices, and we need to stop doing that, because the money all comes from the same pot. It's not siloed. We're spending a lot of money on healthcare. We need to make sure that it is really driving, positive change in every aspect.
So what I also hear then from what you're both saying, but specifically what you just said, Dr. Orling, about being sort of leading, being the leaders, being the examples, there's a marketing aspect to it here. If I can use that word, we have to communicate this outwards too. It can't just be something we do and within the healthcare organization. That needs to be communicated to the community. I know that healthcare organizations communicate to the community in many ways, but this is an aspect that's becoming more and more important that needs to be part of that messaging back. That would be certainly something I would want to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. I think there's lots of great things that people have done. People just don't know about it. People in general, lots of studies show that lots of people want to move, in a forward, positive, low carbon direction. They don't realize that so do other people in their community as well. And sharing those stories is something that's vitally important.
Yeah, it comes to mind. I'm working with the folks at Service New Brunswick and down there, Kate Butler, and she's also a member of the Canadian Hospital Engineering Society. But she made a video of what they've done in one of their institutions, and she interviewed the people throughout the hospitals, the things that they'd done, and this was being used to communicate externally because they were participating in an ISO 50001 approach to doing energy management. But they got that kind of communication piece. They got those stories, small and large stories, out. So I like the idea of communicating those stories. Yeah, storytelling, you've got that. Thank you, Megan. All right, Ed, I think I'm going to put you on the spot next. We're having great discussion here. I'm watching our time, so we do have to keep moving. And so the next question is, what's the value of energy efficiency in healthcare? So next slide there, Alex. And like this question comes back to something I said earlier, Ed. You know what I'm going to say here, right? Years ago, I said to you, I feel that what I do is unimportant compared to what happens in a healthcare organization. But you certainly changed my mind in this. And today, I almost see myself now, from what you've said here today, is the instrument of the healthcare organization. So tell me what I can do to make things better, right? I mean, I've got all these tools and skills that I have. You can tell me how to apply them properly. But Ed, your perspective on this one. What did you tell me? What did you say to me the first time I asked this question of you? Because I felt fairly insignificant compared to the importance of a healthcare organization.
So not dating ourselves, but that was a long time ago, Stephen. So what I said, I'm not sure, but I probably said very similar to what we talked on the previous question, right? How it aligns and it really supports the delivery of healthcare. And I truly believe that. It really does make a better environment of care. It does save money. And then there's the broader, as Dr. Orling and Dr. Lem spoke about, the broader societal impacts as well. The other thing is, I was very fortunate. I had, as I mentioned, a very good energy team, and they were independent. They were usually not under an operations team, so they really got to understand systems, right? So the facilities management team, again, fantastic men and women doing a great job, usually way more busy than they would like, less budget than they would like. Whereas, as I'll call it, a support team, the energy team could go in to help understand systems and provide solutions that would save energy, more energy efficiency, but again, provide for a better environment of care. And the other thing, this is an interesting one. So I mean, I'll say this time and time again until I'm no longer talking about energy, but energy is about people. It's about people using energy. It's providing energy for people to do things, and people are such an important part of this. And there's some research out there showing that when people work, they want to work for an organization that aligns with their values. And there's many people, despite what you read in the headlines, who believe in energy efficiency, believe in doing something about climate change. And I think by nature, people who work in healthcare are caring people, right? I mean, it's a difficult job, and they're putting themselves out there, and they're caring for people. And the energy efficiency as well really allowed people to align their personal values with the organizational values, right? And I can't tell you how many times, I mean, lots of, I think you saw my bio there. We've won awards and done some amazing projects, but some of the best stories I had where we had, maybe residents visiting or new staff coming to work at University Health Network, and they would say, it's different here. The organization cares about energy, right? And I made a new friend, and I could work with them to on their local micro ecosystem for energy and stuff like that. But really, again, helped align that division between that, like Dr. Orling said, first do no harm, right? So we're able to have these values as an individual, and our organization is not only supporting them, but actively trying to implement things like that. And that was one of I'll say the nicer human elements in working in energy efficiency while I was at the hospital, for sure.
Excellent. Well, I know Dr. Lem, Dr. Orling probably want to weigh in on this one, but I'm going to ask you to pause that for one moment, because what I want you to do is I'm going to rephrase the question a little bit, and I'm going to speak to the folks online who are service providers now. So that is the response. I'd like your responses to speak to them. So the next slide there, Alex, is how can energy service providers recognize and articulate the value of their role in serving energy efficiency in healthcare? So it's kind of the same question, but now let's give the folks online who are service providers Dr. Lem, Dr. Erling, maybe we'll start with Dr. Erling. What, just some suggestions on how they can articulate the value of their role and then maybe enhance their proposals that they're making to the healthcare organization?
Yeah, sure, Stephen. I mean, I'm really fortunate because I do work in a smaller community hospital, and so I know our building services manager firsthand, and I get to see the work that he's done. And this week, most of the work that I do is in the operating room. We've had our building maintenance crew in doing rotating closures of our ORs to replace chillers, to work on the humidity, to try and cut down on their energy use, so that we can keep our old Frankenstein-like building going until we get a new build done. I do think that there's an underappreciation for what goes on in the background in healthcare, and it's absolutely essential for our work. As Ed mentioned, healthcare is provided 24/7. We always need to have the lights on. Emergencies don't decide when they're going to happen or happen on a schedule. And so I think having people in building services and energy services involved with some of the sustainability work that hospitals doing is absolutely essential. We have our building services manager on our sustainability working group, and getting people to put their hands up and contribute to those efforts that are multidisciplinary and need to have input across the spectrum is really important. And I think that those are things that people can do to share their expertise.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, it's because these ideas would have served me well a number of years ago. So I think they'll serve me well today. There's some good thoughts in the chat there too. So if you can keep an eye on those things. I'm going to come back to one of them. Dr. Lem, some thoughts.
Well, I'm going to start by saying one of the big reasons I'm really grateful I'm a frontline healthcare professional at this time working at this intersection is that within this profession, we have a huge amount of power to change the system and change public opinion. Not only is the healthcare system responsible for about 40 to 50% of provincial budgets, but we also drive about 10% of global domestic product. So we have a huge amount of control over economic flows, but also carbon flows. We also know that global survey after global survey tells us that healthcare professionals are the most trusted professionals in the world, at the very top of those trust bar graphs, just above scientists and educators and engineers, but way above politicians who are at the very bottom. So when we speak, people listen, whether it's the media, whether it's decision makers or the general public. So we need to recognize the power that we have and use it to stand beside and behind colleagues in healthcare settings who are working towards these same goals, like facilities managers. As I'd mentioned at the beginning, our unique role isn't necessarily to become energy experts, although I've got some engineers in my family, I love engineers. It's to provide the rationale on a patient and community level for those energy efficiency changes to be made. And it sounds obvious, but as clinicians, we make a lot of decisions with our patients every single day that directly drive energy use, whether it be through the tests and interventions that we order, or the pharmaceuticals we prescribe, or don't prescribe or order. In family medicine, the vast majority of our carbon footprint in Canada comes from drugs. So the more we can invest in preventive healthcare or low carbon interventions like nature and social prescribing, the fewer drugs our patients will use, and the more they'll stay out of those carbon intensive facilities like hospitals, and the healthier our population will be. So I think, and I've seen the evidence of the fact that we have immense value as health professionals for serving energy efficiency solutions in healthcare, both as messengers, but also as direct users of that energy.
Yeah, you've answered my next question, which is great, right? So, and yes, I hear this team, but it's the greater team, right? It can't just be one individual or one class of individual. It has to be folks working together, led by people who are in positions of trust. And I think that you well described and well earned too. So the next question, and I'm moving along to keep our timing in line here. So Alex, and Alex, you can go to the next slide. I'm not going to call out either one of you. I'm just going to say, let's make this one a free-for-all. And I think you've already, Dr. Lem, sort of answered this one because you used the term the intersection, right? And you're talking about how this all comes together, right? So
Okay, do you want me to jump in?
sure.
Why don't
Yeah, I
just
knew you
talk a
would.
bit more about this point? And I've talked about air pollution and fossil fuels, and trying to hammer home the point that burning fossil fuels is not just neutral and comparable when it comes to other energy sources. It's driving an air pollution crisis. It's driving the climate crisis, and then harming health in local communities where gas is extracted. And the fact is that only 20% of our health outcomes here in Canada come from what we do in the healthcare system as people who work within this system. The vast majority, the other 80%, comes from the social and structural and ecological determinants of health, which include clean water, clean air, access to healthy food and housing, which was mentioned, and also information environments that aren't polluted with misinformation and disinformation. But there's something I also want to mention, which I haven't yet, which is that local communities where methane gas is fracked are also losing doctors because of the disease patterns they're seeing in those communities. And actually, I just had a reporter from the Narwhal tell me that an article that she'd written about how doctors and health professionals are leaving these communities because of the effects of climate change and the local health impacts of the resource extraction industry are driving issues with healthcare access. So, I've personally spoken with several of these doctors in Dawson Creek. So this is a city in Northeast BC, population about 13,000, that needs about 15 to 20 family doctors in town to keep its ER open and running. And in the last few years, at least 7 longer-term doctors in the community specifically pointed to their concerns about the health and community impacts of the fracking industry, and they quietly packed up their families and left the community. So this represents about half of the total workforce needed to keep that ER open. When you start seeing abnormal patterns of cancer and lung disease in your community, and when your own family members start getting sick, or of 3 kids in one grade level class with brain tumors or cancer. So these are real reports that we're getting from this town. If you can leave, you leave. And so Dawson Creek has seen a record number of ER closures over the past few years. So using gas to power our facilities is also driving issues with access to healthcare itself in these communities, which is a huge public health issue. And we also know that if you don't have a family doctor, you visit the ER more and you have worse health outcomes. So it's a vicious cycle. And one more thing, I know we're trying to keep on time, before I end, is that LNG, we hear about this, economic savior, LNG, which the federal government is really touting as as projects of national interest here on the West Coast that they'll help fast track. It's fracked gas. It comes from these communities that are already suffering health harms from fracking that currently exists. And CAPE has been calling for a comprehensive, cumulative, independent health impact assessment of the LNG and fracking industry within BC for years, because of this existing research and because of on-the-ground reports from communities. And there's precedent for this. So the feds actually dedicated $12 million to investigation of the health impacts, downstream health impacts of the oil sands in Alberta. So I guess in summary, the upshot of everything I just said is that energy management is healthcare. Reducing carbon pollution and local health harms by reducing our energy and fossil fuel use, this is a public health intervention on multiple levels.
Dr. Orling.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Melissa, you have a way of just articulating things so clearly. I think, I just add that Canada has made a commitment to high quality, low carbon, climate resilient care. Some provinces like BC, their health authorities are leading by example and setting sustainability plans for the various health districts that they have. We need the same thing in other provinces, Ontario included. We need to transition our healthcare systems and lead by example away from fossil fuels to using clean electricity and other energy sources such as geothermal or deep water heating and cooling. And that's absolutely essential, because if we continue on the course that we're on and keep doing what we're doing, we are going to continue to negatively impact people's healthcare through climate change and through the secondary effects of air pollution and water pollution, as Melissa's mentioned. And that's just not acceptable. We need to we need to move towards looking at things holistically, health in all our policies, and energy management is absolute foundational to that.
I like that word, foundational. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Ed, I'm gonna move this ahead here because the next slide. So Alexander, just let's move over to slide 23. Okay, there we go. Because I think we've already answered, the other one talked about sort of the local issues, and I know Melissa or Dr. Lam, you described that one quite nicely, as did you, Dr. Erling, there. So what I want to turn our attention to here, and I know, Ed, you had some words on the tip of your tongue. I'll let you jump in at some point, but so what are some of the barriers here?
Sorry, myself, Steve, or Dr. Erling?
Well, yeah, let's, Ed, maybe you can speak to some of the barriers. You've been quiet for a while.
Rare, right? And great conversation and great points made by Dr. Lam and Dr. Erling. So I think we talked about some of these, like the unique profile, the Frankensteining, and things like that. And healthcare is, for better or for worse, it is there's a public interest. So there's a lot of attention paid to it, and it's become very political. It's also very expensive, becoming more expensive. So there's unique opportunities in the sense that, there's a huge building boom for healthcare and hospitals in Ontario. It's not unusual to see the price tag for a new hospital north of $1 billion. That was unthinkable, a few years ago. And even within that $1 billion, as an energy manager, trying to carve out these energy systems, from day one, which is, the best way to do it, the most efficient way to do it, can be very challenging because $1 billion is often not enough to provide all the clinical needs and things like that. So I think that's a big one. I mean, it is expensive, and for all the reasons we've talked about before, and trying to add, convince people. Energy management is not an additional layer, but convincing people that energy management is an integral layer of healthcare is the challenge, right? And that's unique because there's so much going on in healthcare, and there's a lot of people who have a lot of things to say. Often, and probably rightly so, the first people that designers talk to when they're building a new hospital are the clinicians, the ones who have to provide care, right? And they obviously are have their needs and things like that. Working with them to again show that how energy management will not just support it but enhance that. That is the challenge, and I think that's a unique thing we see in healthcare specifically.
If I can just jump in here quickly, we've had a great question in the Q&A, and I think this is a good point just to leave it with you folks. You don't have to answer it right away, but Jamie asks, when it comes to costs and kind of procurement, how can contractors make their way through that process to a point where they're not necessarily adding additional costs to join that RFP process, or kind of get their product in front of the to give a better product, but like for like with what they have already in place instead of the replacement. Wording there, sorry, but basically the barrier of procurement and getting your best product in front of these processes, even at a high cost. So I'll leave that with you on, but it's a question that we had in the Q&A.
I'll
Ed,
add,
you might be able to touch on it down the road.
I think I might be able to answer or begin to answer that one. I mean, procurement, often it's the lowest cost that wins, right? And whereas in life cycle costing, which is what you really have to do to not buy the lowest cost thing, but the lowest cost over the life cycle, and then bring in the other factors, as Dr. Lam and Dr. Erling have talked about, right? So that we monetize those other things, and we show that, in fact, the most sustainable solution is also the most viable one financially as well. And I think that way we can transcend some of the issues with, procurement. And if I interpret the question properly, first cost criteria. So
Can I just jump in there, Stephen? So
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
a quick point, I promise. So often I heard that, working in healthcare, that infection control was always at odds with environmental management, sustainability, where procurement was always at odds. And that was not my experience. They were always colleagues that you work together with to bring the best value for the organization, or, the community as well, right? So I think what you said is key, and it's working together. The energy management, it's not just about the widgets or whatever we're putting in, but it's working with the people to deliver the best value, be it procurement. There are procurement regulations in Ontario, the broader BPS guidelines, right? We have to follow those. Those are always a tool that we could work together with and get the result that was best for the organization. Right. I'll stop now.
So doctors, maybe a minute each for barriers to us, because we've got a few more things to cover here. So what's your number one barrier you believe, if they haven't already been articulated?
Yeah, if I can make a comment there, Stephen. I think that we look at things very short term, and we look primarily at the finances, and we need to look longer term, and we need to look at broader criteria. Procurement as well. If you've got a great product that'll be better for the planet and better for our people and better for healthcare overall, then great, bring it on. And I think that selling those other points is really important for new innovative ways of doing things and products.
Excellent, thank you, Dr. Lem.
Yeah, I think a big barrier is inertia, and also the fact that within the healthcare system, we're already at the borderline in terms of what we can handle. And often sustainability is seen as kind of a frill because, like Dr. Orling said, we're not thinking longer term. But I just, I think about all the co-benefits of sustainability initiatives and the health gains. Just thinking about, again, using clean energy and reducing air pollution and reducing visits to the ER for heart disease and lung disease. You think about the transition to plant-rich diets, which reduces the overall impact of food systems, which is linked to 1/3 of total greenhouse gas emissions, but also reduces our risk of heart disease and colon cancer. You think about social and nature prescribing, integrating those into healthcare, which reduces the need for medication prescriptions and carbon-intensive healthcare system use. And then all of these changes result in overall savings for healthcare. Just name almost any sustainability initiative, and you can also name a health co-benefit and an economic benefit. I think healthcare system savings long-term and sustainability definitely go hand in hand. And I think we can definitely have both at the same time.
I like that. You can have your cake and eat it too. And I've often said that about indoor air quality, indoor environmental quality, and energy as well. You can. And I think one of the future things we're going to do in these webinars, I want to talk about the life cycle costing piece, right? But I also want to talk about the one-page proposal, which is where we can make that financial case, but then we can enhance it with these co-benefits. I'm a huge believer, Dr. Lem, in the co-benefits and articulating those succinctly. And we have a technique we call the one-page proposal. So we're going to bring this one in later on, Ed, in order to be able to capture that without losing it. You can say it, but if you don't give people a tool in which to do what we're saying here, then it's not going to be worthwhile. So I'm going to move ahead now. Are there any unique opportunities? We don't have a lot of time left, but I'm gonna start this one. I saw this as a unique opportunity. I was once you would know JJ Knott, right? I think from Norfolk General Hospital.
JJ,
JJ, he was a facility director. I don't want to understate his position, but very smart guy in healthcare, worked on facilities, and he once told me about when they were looking at repainting patient care rooms, and they increased the reflectance of the paint of the same color, right? And what it did was it reduced that paint actually was more resilient or more rejecting of bacteria, harboring bacteria in the paint, but it also increased the reflectivity of the paint from an optical point of view, and it reduced the lighting power required in patient rooms by 16%. So there's a place where you can have your cake and eat it too. You can enhance the efficiency of that room for providing lighting, and you can enhance the healthcare, the patient care situation as well. So do any of you have any, maybe one idea each, unique opportunity for implementing things? Now that's a very small one, maybe it's a bigger one.
So I can kick this off. I'll do two, if I'll do them real quickly. One is, it came up in the chat, there's a lot of, the wording was inherent energy. There's a lot of energy used in hospitals. You can take advantage of that, right? Don't think of it as waste, think of it as energy that has been purchased, put it to use for you. The other is because of healthcare's huge energy footprint, it can wag the dog. It can be the start of something bigger and better in terms of community, district energy, and things like that. So think outside the healthcare walls and to what's going on, and that opens up a lot of different opportunities for the community, but for the healthcare facility as well.
Dr. Orling.
Yeah, so I would say including conservation initiatives along with implementation of new projects is really important. Certainly, we brought an MRI machine into our hospital recently, required some significant upgrades in order to facilitate that. By tying that in with other measures to reduce our energy needs at the same time concurrently, and using that the necessity to do those things, we have the benefit of this one project coming in. Here's how we're going to make that happen. People buy into that, and you can make some positive changes in that way. So I would say partnering some of these sustainability projects with new implementation projects together is important.
Synergistic interventions.
Yeah.
Dr. Lem.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say it's a huge opportunity for us to tackle mitigation and adaptation to climate change at the same time. So I typically don't work in big healthcare facilities as a community-based doctor, even though I work in rural acute care facilities sometimes. But I've recently had a conversation with the hospital facilities director in downtown Toronto. I'm not going to name names, but who told me that their hospital filled with smoke in 2023 during that awful summer of smoke that affected all of Canada, because their HVAC systems weren't equipped to keep up with the level of air pollution. And the Canadian Climate Institute actually estimated that the health cost of wildfire smoke in just 5 days in June of 2023 was about $1.2 billion. And then the same facilities director also told me that just across the street, an extreme rainfall event completely took out another hospital's ability to autoclave and sterilize medical equipment. So they actually had to run their dirty equipment over to their hospital to keep their ORs running. So we've got patients who are showing up at the doors of these hospitals sick and expecting a level of care that we will increasingly be unable to provide if we don't sprint towards adaptation and mitigation at the same time. So I think all these retrofits, new facilities, this is a real opportunity for us to enshrine all the different principles of sustainability, of adaptation and mitigation at the same time. And it's totally clear that we can't adapt our way to the climate crisis. So the great news is that we have all the clean energy solutions we need. We just need leadership within the healthcare system, which we're seeing today, and we just need the political will to make it happen. I think it's a generational opportunity, not only for climate change to be the greatest global health threat of the 21st century, but acting on it to be the greatest way to improve global health of the 21st century.
I couldn't agree more. I've said it many times. We have the solutions. We just have to get the decisions made to use those solutions and technologies and approaches. So 100%. Well, this has been wonderful. I'm going to skip the next slide because it said, what are the trade-offs for sustainability initiatives? And I like to say no compromise, right? This is not about compromise, right? Unless anybody wants to add anything here, there shouldn't be, we're not trading anything off. In fact, there's a synergy here, which means we're going to get more, right? So I'll leave that one out there. And I'm going to ask you to speak to the next slide, 26, just to sort of take this one back to the whole idea of net zero, which we've learned today isn't just about the carbon, right? Yes, if we get to net zero, we will have that impact in terms of the CO2 in the atmosphere, but there's going to be a much greater impact, right, in terms of not using those fossil fuels and the impact that has on health of our communities and our country and the world in general. Ed?
Yeah, so again, we have great conversation. We've actually could probably speak for another hour and a half if we had if people had time. So what I like about this, I mean, you can see energy efficiency, I think, is one of the 9 boxes there, but it's the greater thing. I mean, we touched on waste. Hospital uses a lot of stuff, and that stuff has inherent carbon. Those supply chains are also at risk due to climate change, right? We've been focusing mainly, maybe I've been thinking mainly downtown, urban areas, but there's a whole other angle for all of these things when you look at remote communities, northern communities, right? Their ability to make change and their impacts from climate change are, amplified, I'll say. So I think, we're just looking at energy efficiency, but what I love about the conversation here today is it's much broader than just energy efficiency. And when you start tying in, sustainability, health, public health, all those kind of things, looking at our broader energy systems, that really is where we can make an extremely strong case for energy efficiency in healthcare. As I think I kind of doing a bit of promotion on LinkedIn or something. I said it's not just about kilowatt hours and dollars and cents. It's about much, much more. And I think that really is the value that energy efficiency can bring to healthcare and health and environmental health and things like that.
So on the next slide, we were going to have a discussion around rewriting that definition of energy management. Maybe I'll just put it up here, right? I think we've done it collectively. I mean, but I welcome Ed, Dr. Erling, Dr. Lem, your comments on this. I think we've done this. I think we've shown how it is far greater, and in fact, energy management isn't just a standalone piece to be defined. But I'll welcome any other comments here.
I think see everything we just spoke about.
Yeah, okay, so that's the awkward,
Okay,
that's the awkward silence,
I mean-
Dr. Len, there we go. So we're gonna move on from that one. So, because I have a couple questions with the audience, but, so Alexander, key resources for healthcare. So you've identified some resources here. Maybe, I think, portfolio manager, obviously the regulations here in Ontario, but also, CSA and ASHRAE and ISO as well. And I mentioned ISO 50001, right? Just like ISO 9000, ISO 14000 for quality and environment. So 50001 defines how organizations can approach energy management, energy efficiency. And in fact, there are organizations in New Brunswick that are doing that today. So that's definitely something we can incorporate into some other future sessions. I think you had a few more resources here too, did you not, Alexander? Yeah, so CHES, Canadian Hospital and Canadian Healthcare Engineering Society, we've done a lot of work with them. I'm not going to read all of these. Dr. Erling, Dr. Lem, would you like us to add to the list here? I'm sure you both do. Maybe you can mention them and then we'll add them before we send the slides out.
I would just say add cape.ca, we're addressing the broader energy ecosystem that helps power healthcare facilities. So take a look at CAPE's work on our website.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Dr. Erling?
I just reinforce that the Canadian Coalition for Green Healthcare and Cascades are both absolutely fantastic organizations that have done, lots of work, multidisciplinary across the whole spectrum, looking at healthcare very broadly, and they're both worth a look at as well.
Excellent, thank you. So we've got about 6 minutes left. Alexander, we had a slide for questions, right? We've had quite a few questions in the chat, but the one I want to get to, and you actually have a blank slide here for session 2 overview, because we really haven't got that yet, but I think the key one that I'd like to move to is slide 32, which is what topics would you like to have a deeper dive into? So what we're really asking here is we've got 2 more sessions here. We have some sense of what we want to present in them. I've talked about things I'd like to add to those. So we're going to sort of lay it out to everybody, and including Dr. Lem, Dr. Erling, what things, would you like to see us add to these things? And we'll welcome your input any way you were willing to share it too. So, and we'll use the chat, or I guess people can open up their mic too, right? So.
Yeah, I think it'd be fantastic to just hear about some of the, really progressive energy management solutions that hospitals have put in. Cowichan in BC is putting in a very low carbon facility, as is Prince Edward County in Ontario, and hearing some of the challenges that they've had, but also some of the successes and some of the progressive things that are being implemented there would be fantastic.
So again, I'm going to put the word stories in there too, right? Maybe put stories and case studies. Case studies are I like the word stories, right? I think stories are really good, right? So.
I would love to see,
names, which is interesting. Usually I recognize more names.
Yeah, not that, I mean, they said like 70+ people were.
I think someone's unmuted.
Yeah, there we go. Dr. Lem, go ahead.
I would love to see some discussion about how nature-based solutions can reduce energy needs. We know that the urban heat island effect is real. And so my colleague Miles Sargent, who is the executive director of the Canadian Coalition for Green Healthcare, also does a lot of work around Canadian healthcare forests, so tree planting and increasing green spaces around healthcare facilities. And not only will this reduce overall energy needs, typically in the summer, but also the trees can act as a windbreak and cold break in the wintertime and reduce heating needs if you plant enough of them. But they also improve the health of the patients within if they can look outside onto that green space or have more green space in their communities. So I'd love to see some discussion happening at that intersection.
Excellent. I see from the chat, here's the one for you, Ed. Topic, what mechanical engineers need to know about practices to adopt about energy management when designing healthcare facilities, right?
Yep.
So yeah, So, I mean,
Huge.
seriously, education specific to healthcare for the designers and for those engineers and technical folks.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I noticed here, and I'd like to hear, is this is from Corey Jones, talking about productivity, not just efficiency, right? Because if you go back to that stiff definition of energy management, it's the energy used for what you get out, right? What it costs you to do what you do. But they're talking about productivity. So I like the idea of productivity as well, because you're manipulating both the numerator and the denominator in that situation. And I think that's good. I mean, I know we practice that in industry, but it seems that maybe that's being practiced in healthcare too. So maybe a story around that would be wonderful. Again,
Q&A
emphasizing the human element. Go ahead.
In the Q&A, Corey also touched on the importance, I think, of the synergy between teams and specifically within this industry and the value and importance of that communication, education, and all those synergies of kind of the whole unit working together.
Yep.
And
Lots
Jeff,
of silos.
Jeff mentioned the sustainable building is not expensive, and that's true, right? Because if you look at it on the life cycle basis and on the from the holistic point of view, you'll find that sustainable building is probably the most attractive one, right? By that broader criteria. Yeah, so really looking at not just life cycle, but also all those other connections, right, to the sustainable building, the impact or lack thereof that it has. All right, well, we're drawing in on our time, so I'm going to flip it over to you, Alexandra, to do our standard closing, and then we can all head home. And thank you, Dr. Lam, Dr. Orling. I appreciate it. I like the interaction. We didn't have any awkward silences there, so it's great. Thank you, and you too, Ed. By the way, sorry.
Thank you.
And thank you to Stephen for hosting our panel. You did a fantastic job.
Yeah, as just mentioned in the chat, there's a question about when the next webinar in this series is, and it is scheduled for March 10th, and the topic is strategies for greener healthcare. So that's what we're going to touch on, but also incorporating a lot of what we heard from you folks today. And we encourage you to stay connected with Save On Energy, whether it's through keeping an eye on the bulletin, whether it's signing up for the next event in this series, checking out the live training calendar and the training and support webpage. But also for you who might be your first time joining us, you may not have heard of our post-webinar training support. And those are some one-on-one coaching session opportunities for folks that have participated in Save On Energy events and have a couple more questions about what they heard, whether it's kind of building a case study with some data they have, whether it's digging a little deeper into what's going on in their role as an energy manager or an energy professional, or whether it's just touching on a little bit more, digging in deeper of the subject of the webinar. We encourage folks to stay connected with that. And if you do reach out to kind of get that post-webinar training support, someone from the Save On Energy team will reach out, clarify your needs, and pair you with a professional in the industry. Last but not least, we have the capability building program. So as just mentioned, stay connected the best you can, and we'll see you at the next one. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Again,
Thank you all.
thank you to the panel, and thanks, Alexander, for
Steven.
hosting, and thanks everybody for your interactions on the chats. I didn't see the Q&A because of technical issues, but I'm sure it's very rich. We'll try to capture some of that too.
Thanks. Take care, everyone.
Great to meet
Thank
you,
you.
Dr. Lam.
So,
Good to see you, Dave.
Bye-bye.
You too, Ed. Yeah.